Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of The Suited Shootist, and as promised from last week, I'm going to continue with the questions answered that I kind of was working on previously. Like I said in the last video, if you're a new subscriber, welcome. I really do appreciate the support. If you find the channel useful, I would very strongly encourage that you go check out the Bespoke Solutions Facebook page. There's a ton of great conversation going in there. You've got some folks that are looking at wardrobe development. You've got some folks that are trying to find integrations to their carry gear. And sometimes just people are finding sales and discounts that are popping up on elevated wardrobe staples. So that way, if you are trying to up your game, there are some opportunities to do that without having to drop a bunch of money. So if you haven't joined already, I definitely recommend that you check it out. Also, if you've found the channel to be particularly useful and you would like to support it directly, I do have the Patreon available. If you want to click the link down below and sign up, I would be deeply appreciative. I've got some great patrons so far. We do some live chats every month. It's a great time. And there's a lot of exciting stuff for the patrons that's coming up in the future as well. One of the things is you can actually vote on future content. So if there is something in particular that you want to see, that is the most surefire way to guarantee that I will touch on it sooner rather than later. But I don't want to spend too much time on that, so let's dive back into the questions. After having left off with the previous one that some folks asked me on a couple of occasions, and this can be a tough one, is kind of smart casual or dapper casual, because there's not really a whole lot of rules for casual, and you can get away with quite a bit. And then once you start getting into business casual, business formal, black tie and white tie, those are so structured that there's a literal framework of what you were expected to wear. But those circumstances at this point are much fewer and further between, and so that smart casual arena is where somebody that is a little bit more sartorially adept can kind of flex their ability, and that's really where you can kind of show off as being well dressed without looking like you're trying too hard. My go-to is dark denim, a button-down, maybe a sport jacket or a vest, and typically either my chukkas or my cap-toe leather boots. It's a pretty surefire look, and if you understand the difference in the fabrics, it is a really good way to balance kind of the rugged and the refined archetypes that Tanner Guzzi talks about, which are the predominant influencing factors in my personal style. So dark denim and leather footwear is kind of a safe bet for that, and then you can kind of play with the shirts that you're wearing. I really try and keep it with a collar if at all possible, but if you are going to forego the collar, at the bare minimum a Henley, but t-shirts are kind of out for that in terms of smart casual. Vests are a great option because it allows you to introduce an additional fabric layer, an additional texture or pattern, but without the bulk of a full-blown jacket. And the fit on vests and waistcoats can sometimes be a little bit more forgiving, because really as long as it fits in the body and the armholes aren't too low, you're pretty much good to go, and they're relatively easy to get altered. So for smart casual, dark denim, leather footwear, and then kind of play around with the shirts is a good place to start. Another one that I've touched on a few times is, how do you carry a firearm inside the waistband when your shirt is tucked in? Well, luckily for y'all, I've actually done a few videos that I'll put in the card on my different takes on that. Short version is, depending on the circumstance, it's really going to either be my 32 Kel-Tec in a hip pocket or the Filster Enigma. Those two really fit the majority of the bases that I've got. If you are not yet in possession of a Filster Enigma, if you're on the wait list, which is happily shortening by the day, there's also a video in that playlist of the elements to look for whenever you are trying to get an effective tuckable traditional belt holster. So definitely check that out as well. One question that I get quite a bit is, how can I start dressing better while still feeling authentic and not have it feel like a costume? And that one is tough. I struggled with that for a long time because I followed a lot of the kind of very popular style influencers, you know, the kind of Billy Mays types that are screaming at the camera and getting you all hyped up. And man, some of the stuff that they recommended, I tried it and I felt like a clown suit to me. There is going to be some trial and error. That's just the reality of it. I will say that the two biggest tips I can give on that are, number one, Tanner Guzzi's style archetype quiz that I mentioned previously, and again I'll include that link in the video description, as well as style icons are immensely helpful. Style icons can either be a celebrity, a public figure, or even a character that dresses in a manner that you like and that you want to try and copy, or it can be a character or a public figure who you already look like. They have an army of stylists and image people behind them already that are finding the things that make them look good. So if you can find someone who has roughly the same features, roughly the same build, roughly the same complexion, then look at how they dress and pay attention to those attributes and see what you can work in. Between those two, I think that is a good way to start. It's going to require some research, or you could just go the full-blown minimalist route and live in nothing but gray trousers, dark denim, and white and blue Oxford shirts. It's a very safe bet. It can be a little boring. So, Desfinato was one track on the album, not the whole album. So just kind of an example there. Another question that I get quite a bit, because I talk a lot about altering your clothing, is what clothing benefits from tailoring, from alteration. The short version is all of it. One of the reasons why the celebrities always tend to look as well put together as they are is because they will generally buy a garment that fits them at whatever their largest dimension is, and then have it altered and taken in everywhere else. So I personally am not going to do that on every single stitch of clothing in my wardrobe because it's prohibitively expensive. So number one, the clothing that is going to benefit most from alteration is the clothing you are going to wear the most, because it boils back down to that equation of cost per wear. If I'm able to find a really nice suit on consignment and it's only $500 when the retail price on it was $2,000, sure, I only paid 25% of retail on it, cool. But if I only wear suits twice a year and that thing cost me $500 before any kind of alterations, and let's assume that it doesn't have to be taken apart and completely put back together, but let's say it costs another $100 to get altered, so you're in it for $600. In order to get that cost per wear down, you'd have to wear it every single day for 2 years. Now, for more expensive garments like that, you're not necessarily going to get the cost per wear down that low unless you keep it for 5 or 10 years, which is a realistic possibility. But if you've got a good pair of trousers or a nice shirt that doesn't quite fit you, but it's your favorite one and you always want to break that out, spend the money on that first, because you always want to spend the money on what you're going to get the most mileage out of. Speaking of, another question that I get is, how do I pick a tailor? How do I interview somebody? There's a lot of nuance to this. Number one, depending on where you live, they may or may not be particularly friendly to the idea of working with somebody who carries a firearm. One of the little kind of code words that I found to kind of test the waters, that I kind of picked up when I was living back on the East Coast, was I would ask the guy if they work with a lot of plainclothes law enforcement. And they would either look confused, in which case that told me that I probably shouldn't be, asking them to tailor around firearms, or they would kind of give me this knowing look and they got what I was asking. So if you're trying to feel them out, that would be a good way to go. ask what kind of work they do, because it's very different, the alterations that like a dry cleaners will typically offer, which is going to be, you know, basic mending, hemming, reattaching buttons and things like that, from a master tailor who can literally take a bolt of fabric and assemble a garment. So understanding what their scope of work and what their capacity is critical. Ask what kind of work they've done in the past. And, so there again is going to be a little bit of trial and error. It is a bit of an interview process to kind of feel out. It's always worth asking what services they offer, because they're not necessarily going to be publicized. If they say everything, run. Fucking run. Because the more specific they are, the better. In the major fashion cities like Paris, like Naples, Milan, Hong Kong, you're not going to have the same shop making shirts as you are making suits, as you are making ties. So if you've got somebody that says, oh yeah, I can do everything, he probably doesn't do any of it all that well. And especially if they're speaking with that lack of specificity. So when you're picking a tailor, that's kind of the best thing. Ask if they work with plainclothes law enforcement, ask what kind of services they offer, and see how specific their responses are. Or if they come back with kind of consultative questions of, well, what is it that you're looking for, and that kind of stuff. That's always kind of an idea. The other thing is, give them a trial run with something relatively cheap and see how they do. Because if, for example, you take a pair of trousers to a place to get them hemmed, and all they do is a shitty little tack stitch on the left and right sides of the seam at 9 and 3 o'clock, instead of stitching the hem all the way around, there is no chance that I'm going to take one of my canali jackets there to get anything done, because if they're half-assing it on something simple, there is no chance that they're going to be able to appropriately do anything on a high-end garment. So hopefully that gives you some insight. Again, this is just kind of the beginning of it. What are the questions that you have? I would love to hear them down in the comments. Please let me know, because the entire reason that I'm doing this is to help people learn from my trial and error. So if you've got anything that you'd like to see me touch on, by all means, put it down in the comments. If you really want to see me touch on it, sign up for Patreon, and you can kind of dictate what the upcoming videos are. We'll go from there. So aside from that, I hope everybody has a great week. Stay dangerous and stay sharp.